The idiots on the show The Five decided to fearmonger about higher wages. Take a look.
Living up to his promise to be one of the most progressive presidents ever, and it's still not enough for the far left. The so-called centrist is now under pressure to go nuclear to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Bernie Sanders pressing Biden's budget office nominee.
Will you, at this point, commit to doing what President Biden and I and many others want to see happen? And that is help us move to end starvation wages in America by raising the minimum wage over a period of several years.
Absolutely.
And squad member Cori Bush says $15 an hour is only the beginning.
You know, we have to start with a $15 an hour minimum wage. It's the start. Like, it should be higher than that right now, but that's where we are. So we have to at least give people that.
Well, Greg, way more than 100,000 restaurants went out of business last year. I guess that's just not enough.
Yeah, first off, we've got to address the new phrase, starvation wages, okay? The idea that people in the U.S. are starving when 40% of young adults aged 20 to 39 are obese. The number goes to 45% when you're my age, early 40s. But you can make an argument about the minimum wage without suggesting the other side wants you to starve people to death. So let's not give in to their language. And people forget what minimum wage is, to your point about restaurants. It's the starting point, not the finishing point. You're only supposed to be on that first rung for 3 to 6 months. We all made minimum wage. I made $3.35 an hour, and you couldn't wait to get up higher. It was actually incitement, really positive incitement to work hard. And the point is always forgotten by these economics deniers that someone at that pizza joint already makes $15 and he's been there for a year. So when you raise the minimum wage for that entry level, what do you got to do for everybody else, including that other guy? You got to raise their salary too, because you can't have the minimum wage be the same as that other guy, because then he wasn't making minimum wage before.
You raise wages, and then you might have to raise more wages? The horror. Okay, it's so funny to me that half the time they talk like this, and then the other half the time they pretend the Republicans are the party of the working class, and we fight for the working class, and like, look at Trump, he's all about the blue-collar guy, and we're against the establishment and the elites. It's like Tucker's fake populist tap dance. But look at how they talk. I've never heard a segment more elitist than this. If you raise wages for some, you might have to raise wages for more. I file that under the category of awesome, bro. Now, listen, to be fair to them, their argument is, hey, if you do it, there's going to be widespread job loss and unemployment's going to go up because businesses can't afford it, basically. Assuming for a second that's true, not necessarily true, but let's assume for a second that's true, there are other ways to address that problem. Set up a program to subsidize these small businesses so that they can afford the $15, but they're only subsidized if they keep the workers on at a $15 wage. That's one way to handle it. The other way that we've talked about before is if we did a living wage law that was a little more targeted. So you do it like by county or something. So, you know, in rural Nebraska, the minimum wage might be $9.25 because that's a living wage there. But in New York City, it might be $23 or $27 an hour or whatever it is because that's a living wage there. So there are ways to make it more affordable for people given their own context and where they are and how much a dollar is really worth there, so on and so forth. So there are other ways to address that. They jump right to just don't raise the wage. Whatever you do, just don't raise the wage. And by the way, now, to get to that claim, guys, how many times have I brought this up on the show? In Australia, they have about a $15 minimum wage, the equivalent of about $15 US. That's what their minimum wage is. Their unemployment rate is the exact same as our unemployment rate. If a $15 minimum wage was going to lead to widespread unemployment, then why isn't their unemployment significantly higher than ours? Why aren't they a hellscape? Because it doesn't necessarily do that. Now listen, you have to do it intelligently, right? So you have to phase it in over time because it avoids some of these problems. Like, don't get it twisted. It needs to be addressed in a reasonable, nuanced, complex, intelligent way. It does. But they just want to hand wave it all away and say we can't do it for reasons X, Y, and Z. There are some places in the United States that have $15 minimum wages already. It hasn't led to widespread job loss. It just hasn't. Okay? Now, if there is a marginal uptick, again, there are other ways to handle that. There are other ways to address that. And the funniest thing to me is when he says these economics deniers. This is like the oldest fucking dumb right-wing trick in the book where, like, put the substance of the conversation aside completely, and all you have to do is smugly assert to whoever you're talking to, you don't agree with my opinion on this, bro? Economics denier much? I guess you don't even know basic economics, bro. I guess you don't even know basic economics. If this was going to be so catastrophic, why is it they already have it in Australia and they're doing fine? Why is it that in some Scandinavian countries, it's not even that they have a minimum wage. They don't. They have almost universal collective bargaining, so the wage floor is way above effectively $15 an hour. Why have those countries not totally imploded? Perhaps because it's bullshit and this is propaganda to keep wages low in order for the wealthy to make more money, because that's who they're representing on Fox News. They're representing corporations, the wealthy, the business owners. That's what they're doing. So I like how they're mocking Cori Bush when Cori Bush says, well, actually $15 is a start. It should be higher than that. I get it that these guys are against, poor people and workers at the bottom of that economic ladder. But listen, if the minimum wage kept up with worker productivity, it would be over $20 an hour already. It would be. It would be. So the idea that that's like something to scoff at. No, the dumber position is what they're saying of like, just leave the wage as it is. And by the way, if they're really being honest, they lean in a more anarcho-capitalist direction where they would want to have no minimum wage at all. Then they bring up the business closures. Yeah, but that has a lot more to do with COVID than it has to do with the wage. Again, there are places that already have $15 minimum wage, and there hasn't been widespread job loss. Then he says he's mocking the idea that it's a starvation wage and that some people in America are hungry, because he says 40% of Americans are obese. 40% is also the number that we read maybe 2 or 3 months ago when there were food lines for people. 40% of the country was food insecure is the term I'm looking for. We all saw the lines at these food banks, the endless lines. Imagine scoffing at the pain people are feeling now, or downplaying it, or acting like it's not actually that bad. You think it's not that bad because you're comfy as fuck, Greg Gutfeld. And then this will be the final point I'll make here, but I hate the argument of like, minimum wage is the starting point and not the finishing point. Like, we all made it and then we worked our way up. What about the people who don't work their way up, Greg? And there are a lot of them. We're always going to need people to do these jobs. Always. Machines can never take over all the jobs, right? Maybe they can. I don't know. I'll put a little asterisk by that point. But for now, you can't have machines do all those jobs. So you're always going to need people to do those jobs. So then the question becomes, should we pay people enough to survive in those jobs? Imagine saying no. Imagine saying, no, I think you should work full time and not make enough money to survive. Well, then own it that you're in favor of, wage slavery. Own it. I want you to work full time and not make enough money to survive. So in other words, you're not lazy. It's not like you don't have morals or ethics or you're not a good person. You're a good person who has a job and has work ethic, and you work full time and you don't make enough money to survive. And he says, that's fine. That's fine, because it's supposed to be just a starting point, not a finishing point. Not everybody can work their way up, and we're always going to need people to do these jobs. So the question is, how much are we going to actually value them? And it's not that much to say people deserve a living wage. They deserve to make enough money to meet their needs in these situations. And actually, it would cut the size of the government because the social safety net would be reduced if we had a $15 minimum wage. Because people no longer need to make up the difference and run to the government to get help from social safety net programs, because they will be making enough money just through their paycheck. So it would shrink the size of government. Isn't that something you're supposed to support as a conservative? No, because the bottom line is these guys are on the side of the corporations and the billionaires and the owners. That's what it is. And they're not pro-worker. They were never pro-worker. And, they couldn't make it any more clear. They are fear-mongering at the idea of raising wages.